The auditorium was buzzing with the kind of nervous, joyful energy that only comes with a milestone like high school graduation. I sat in the third row, my hands folded in my lap, watching our daughter Emily's name inch closer and closer to the top of the program. My wife, Linda, sat beside me, her posture stiff, her eyes darting between her phone and the stage. I tried to catch her eye, to share a smile, but she wouldn't look at me. I chalked it up to nerves, or maybe the stress of planning the after-party, but a cold knot had been growing in my stomach for weeks. When Emily's name was finally called, I stood and clapped, pride swelling in my chest as she crossed the stage, her smile radiant, her eyes searching the crowd for us. We met her outside after the ceremony, the sun warm on our faces, the air filled with laughter and the scent of fresh-cut grass. Emily hugged us both, her cap askew, her cheeks flushed with happiness. "Let's get a picture," she said, handing her phone to a friend. We posed, arms around each other, a perfect family, at least for that moment. As the crowd began to thin, Linda turned to me, her voice low but steady. "Mark, I need to talk to you. Alone." I nodded, following her to a quiet corner of the parking lot. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "I'm leaving you. I've already packed my things. I'll be gone by the time you get home tonight." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment I couldn't breathe. "You're what?" She looked away, her jaw set. "I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce. I'm sorry to do this here, but I needed you to know." I glanced back at Emily, who was watching us with wide, confused eyes. I felt the world tilt beneath my feet, humiliation burning in my chest as I realized people were staring, whispering. I forced myself to stay calm, to keep my voice steady. "We'll talk about this later, Linda. Not here, not today." She shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I've made up my mind." She turned and walked away, leaving me standing alone in the parking lot, the weight of her words settling over me like a shroud. I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to shout after her, to demand an explanation. Instead, I walked back to Emily, pulling her into a hug. "It's going to be okay, sweetheart, I promise." But as I held her, I made a silent vow. I wasn't going to let Linda control the story. I wasn't going to let her turn Emily's graduation into my humiliation. If you enjoy powerful stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. I would fight back, with dignity, with evidence, and with a plan Linda would never see coming. And when the time was right, she would be the one screaming. The drive home from Emily's graduation was a blur of silence and forced smiles. Emily sat in the back seat, her cap in her lap, glancing between me and the empty passenger seat where Linda should have been. I tried to keep my voice light, asking about her friends, her plans for the summer, but my mind was racing. Every word Linda had said echoed in my head, each syllable a fresh cut. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw the signs immediately. The garage door left open, Linda's car gone, the recycling bin overflowing with empty boxes. Emily went inside first, calling for her mother, but the only answer was the hollow echo of an empty house. I found a note on the kitchen counter, written in Linda's neat, familiar script. "Mark, I'm sorry. I need to do this for myself. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. I'll be in touch." I stared at the note, my hands shaking, anger and humiliation warring inside me. Emily stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with fear. "Dad, what's happening?" I forced a smile, pulling her into a hug. "It's going to be okay, Em. We'll figure it out." But as I held her, I felt something shift inside me, a resolve I hadn't felt in years. I spent the next hour walking through the house, taking stock of what Linda had left behind. Her closet was empty, her jewelry box gone, the safe in the study open and cleaned out. I checked the bank accounts and saw that she'd transferred half our savings to a new account in her name. I sat at my desk, my mind racing. I remembered the advice my father had given me years ago. Never let anyone take your dignity. If they try, fight back with your mind, not your fists. I opened my laptop and began to gather evidence. Bank statements, emails, text messages, anything that might help me in the coming storm. I called Tom, my oldest friend and a lawyer, and told him everything. He listened in silence, then said, "Mark, you need to protect yourself. Start documenting everything. Don't confront her yet. Let her make the first move." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of calm settle over me. That night, I made dinner for Emily, trying to keep things normal. We watched a movie, laughed at the silly parts, and I tucked her into bed, promising that everything would be okay. But as I sat alone in the dark, I made a plan. Linda thought she could humiliate me in public, take half of everything, and walk away clean. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I would fight back, not with anger, but with evidence, with strategy, with the quiet, relentless power of a man who refused to be broken. And when the time was right, I would show her, and everyone else, just how wrong she was. The first battle was over. The war for my dignity, my future, and my daughter's happiness had just begun. The next morning, I woke before sunrise, the house eerily quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirp of birds outside. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me. The pain of Linda's betrayal was sharp, but beneath it, a cold determination had taken root. I opened my laptop and began to dig. I pulled up every bank statement from the past year, highlighting every transfer Linda had made to her new account. I printed out emails, her correspondence with lawyers, her secret conversations with a realtor about selling our vacation home, even a few messages to an old college friend that hinted at something more than friendship. I created a folder labeled Linda Evidence and filled it with every scrap of proof I could find. By the time Emily woke up, I had a thick stack of documents and a plan forming in my mind. I made her breakfast, trying to keep my voice light, but she saw through me. "Dad, is Mum really not coming back?" I hugged her, fighting back tears. "I don't know, Em, but whatever happens, I'm here for you." After she left to meet friends, I called Tom. He listened as I laid out everything I'd found. "Mark, this is good. You're building a case, but you need more. If she's planning to file for divorce, she'll try to paint you as the bad guy. You need witnesses, timelines, anything that shows you've been a good father and husband." I nodded, making notes. "What about the graduation? She humiliated me in front of everyone." Tom's voice was grim. "That's public. If anyone recorded it, get a copy, and start talking to people, neighbors, friends, even Emily's teachers. Build a wall of evidence." I spent the rest of the day making calls, sending emails, and quietly asking around. I learned that Linda had been planning this for months. telling friends she was done with Mark, complaining about me at Bowie and K Club, even hinting that she'd found someone new. The pieces fell into place, each one a fresh wound, but also a weapon. That evening, Emily and I had dinner with Tom and his wife. After Emily went to bed, Tom pulled me aside. "You're doing everything right, Mark. But be ready. Linda's going to make her move soon. And when she does, you need to be ready to counter." I nodded, feeling the weight of the coming battle. As I drove home, I rehearsed what I would say if Linda called, how I would stay calm, how I would refuse to let her provoke me. I checked my phone obsessively, waiting for the next blow. It came the next morning. A formal letter from Linda's lawyer, delivered by courier. She was filing for divorce, seeking full custody of Emily, half of all assets, and exclusive rights to the vacation home. The letter accused me of being emotionally distant, unreliable, and unfit as a father. I read it twice, my hands shaking, then called Tom. "It started," I said. He replied, "Then let's finish it." That night, as I sat in my study surrounded by evidence, I felt a strange sense of calm. Linda thought she could destroy me with a public spectacle and a few lies. She had no idea what I was capable of. The war had begun, and I was ready. The days that followed Linda's legal ambush were a masterclass in silent, strategic preparation. I spent every spare moment building my case, documenting every interaction with Emily, every school event I'd attended, every parent-teacher conference where I'd shown up alone. I called Emily's teachers and coaches, asking if they'd be willing to write letters about my involvement in her life. Most agreed without hesitation, some even expressing surprise at Linda's accusations. I met with Tom every evening, our kitchen table covered in files and legal pads. He coached me on how to respond to Linda's lawyer, never with anger, always with facts. "Let her make the noise," he said. "You bring the evidence." I followed his advice to the letter. When Linda's lawyer sent a list of demands, full custody, spousal support, the house, the car, I replied with a calm, detailed inventory of our assets, highlighting every joint account, every shared investment, every payment I'd made for Emily's education and Linda's personal expenses. I included copies of emails where Linda had thanked me for supporting her through her career changes, her health scares, her mother's illness. I even found a video from Emily's 13th birthday, where Linda had toasted me as the best father and husband anyone could ask for. Tom grinned when he saw it. "That's gold, Mark. Use it." Meanwhile, I kept my distance from Linda, refusing to engage in arguments or emotional traps. When she called to scream at me about turning Emily against her, I simply said, "I'm doing what's best for our daughter. I hope you are too." I documented every call, every text, every voicemail. Emily sensed the tension, but never asked for details. I made sure our time together was filled with normalcy. Movie nights, walks in the park, long talks about her dreams for college. I wanted her to know that no matter what, I was still her dad. The first court date arrived on a rainy Monday. I wore my best suit, my nerves masked by a calm resolve. Linda arrived with her lawyer, her face set in a mask of righteous indignation. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes, listened as Linda's lawyer painted me as a distant, unreliable father. Then Tom stood and presented our evidence. Letters from teachers, photos from school events, bank statements, The birthday video. The judge watched the video twice, her expression unreadable. When it was my turn to speak, I described my love for Emily, my commitment to her happiness, my willingness to share custody if it meant keeping her life stable. Linda's lawyer objected, but the judge silenced him with a look. "I see a father who has been present, supportive, and responsible," she said. "I see no evidence of the neglect you allege." Linda's face twisted in shock, her composure cracking for the first time. The judge ordered a temporary joint custody arrangement and scheduled a full hearing for the following month. As we left the courtroom, Linda turned on me, her voice a hiss. "You think you've won? This isn't over." I met her gaze, steady and unafraid. "No, Linda. It's just beginning." That night I sat with Tom, reviewing the day's events. "You did everything right, Mark," he said. "Now we keep building. The truth is on your side." I nodded, feeling the first real hope since the day Linda walked out. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, I believed I could win. Not just for myself, but for Emily. The weeks leading up to the full custody hearing were a test of patience, discipline, and emotional endurance. Every day, I woke early, made breakfast for Emily, and walked her to the bus stop, determined to give her as much stability as possible. I kept a journal of our daily routines, noting every meal, every homework session, every doctor's appointment. Tom insisted on it, reminding me that the smallest details could tip the scales in court. Meanwhile, Linda's campaign against me grew more desperate. She posted cryptic messages on social media, hinting at abuse and neglect, tagging mutual friends and even some of Emily's teachers. I resisted the urge to respond, knowing that any public argument would only hurt my case. Instead, I quietly collected screenshots, adding them to my growing file of evidence. Emily's teachers reached out, expressing concern about the rumors. I met with them privately, sharing my side of the story and providing documentation of my involvement in Emily's life. Their support was unwavering, and several offered to testify on my behalf. At home, I focused on creating a safe, loving environment for Emily. We cooked together, planted a small garden in the backyard, and spent weekends exploring local museums and parks. I encouraged her to talk about her feelings, to ask questions, to express her fears and hopes. She confided that Linda had been distant for months, often leaving her alone in the evenings while she ran errands or met friends. Emily admitted she felt caught in the middle, but she was grateful for the stability I provided. As the hearing approached, Tom and I met nightly to review our strategy. We rehearsed my testimony, anticipated Linda's arguments, and prepared responses to every possible accusation. Tom was relentless, pushing me to stay calm, to stick to the facts, to let the evidence speak for itself. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. I lay awake, replaying every moment of the past few months. The humiliation at graduation, the shock of Linda's departure, the slow, steady work of rebuilding my life. I thought about Emily, about the future I wanted for her, about the example I hoped to set. I resolved to fight with dignity, to show her that strength wasn't about anger or revenge, but about resilience and truth. The morning of the hearing dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully, my nerves masked by a calm determination. Emily hugged me before school, her eyes shining with trust. "Good luck, Dad. I love you." I smiled, my heart full. I love you too, Em. No matter what happens, we'll get through this together. At the courthouse, Tom met me with a reassuring smile. You're ready, Mark. Just tell the truth. As we entered the courtroom, I felt a surge of resolve. Linda was already there, her lawyer whispering urgently in her ear. The judge entered, and the hearing began. Linda's lawyer launched into a tirade of accusations, painting me as cold, inattentive, and unfit. Tom countered with our mountain of evidence: letters from teachers, photos from school events, bank statements, the birthday video, and my detailed journal. The judge listened intently, her expression unreadable. When it was my turn to speak, I described my love for Emily, my commitment to her happiness, and my willingness to share custody if it meant keeping her life stable. The judge asked a few pointed questions, then called a recess. As I stepped into the hallway, Tom clapped me on the back. You did great, Mark. Now we wait. I nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion and hope. The battle was almost over, but the final verdict was still to come. The courthouse hallway was thick with tension as Tom and I waited for the judge's decision. I paced the marble floor, replaying every moment of the hearing in my mind. Linda's lawyer's accusations, the calm way Tom had countered with evidence, the judge's sharp questions about Emily's well-being. I remembered the way Linda's voice had cracked when she tried to explain her absences, the way she'd avoided looking at me or Emily's teachers as they testified on my behalf. I could still see the judge's eyes narrowing as she watched the birthday video, as she read the letters from Emily's coaches and teachers, as she flipped through my journal of daily routines. Tom sat beside me, his expression unreadable, but I could sense his confidence. You did everything right, Mark. The evidence is on your side. Just breathe. I nodded, trying to steady my nerves. The bailiff finally called us back into the courtroom, and I took my seat, my heart pounding. The judge entered, her face stern but not unkind. She began by summarizing the evidence, her voice clear and deliberate. This court has reviewed extensive documentation of Mr. Carter's involvement in his daughter's life, including testimony from educators, community members, and the child herself. The court finds no evidence of neglect or unfitness. Conversely, Mrs. Carter's actions, both in her public announcement at the graduation and her subsequent absences, raise serious concerns about her judgment and priorities. Linda's face went pale, her hands trembling in her lap. The judge continued, "It is the court's decision to grant primary custody to Mr. Carter, with generous visitation rights for Mrs. Carter, contingent upon her participation in counseling and regular check-ins with a court-appointed guardian." The words washed over me like a wave of relief. I glanced at Tom, who grinned and squeezed my shoulder. Linda's lawyer object, Ted, but the judge silenced him with a look. This decision is final. The child's best interests are paramount. As the courtroom emptied, Linda approached me, her eyes brimming with tears. You set me up, Mark. You made me look like a monster. I shook my head, my voice steady. No, Linda. You did that all by yourself. I just showed the truth. She turned away, her shoulders shaking. Emily ran to me, her arms flung around my waist. We did it, Dad. We're going to be okay. I hugged her tightly, my heart full. Tom joined us, his voice warm. You fought with dignity, Mark. You showed everyone what real strength looks like. That night, as Emily and I sat on the porch, Watching the stars, I felt a peace I hadn't known in months. The battle was over, but the journey was just beginning. I promised myself and Emily that I would never let anyone take our happiness for granted again. The war for my dignity, my future, and my daughter's well-being had been won, not with anger or violence, but with evidence, patience, and the quiet, relentless power of a man who refused to be broken. The weeks after the custody ruling were a strange blend of relief and adjustment. Emily and I settled into a new rhythm, our home filled with the quiet comfort of routines, morning pancakes, evening walks, and long talks about her dreams for college. I made sure she knew she could talk to me about anything, and slowly the tension that had haunted her eyes began to fade. Linda, meanwhile, was a ghost on the periphery of our lives. She called occasionally, her voice brittle, asking to see Emily or to discuss logistics, but the warmth was gone. She began her court-ordered counseling, and I received regular updates from the guardian assigned to monitor her visits. Each report was clinical, noting Linda's progress but also her struggles with anger and denial. I kept meticulous records of every interaction, every visit, every expense related to Emily's care. Tom insisted on it, reminding me that the legal battle might not be over. People like Linda don't give up easily, Mark. Stay vigilant. I took his advice to heart, scanning every document, saving every email, and keeping a journal of Emily's milestones. Her first driving lesson, her acceptance letter to a summer program, her growing circle of friends. One afternoon, Emily came home with a flyer for a father-daughter dance at the community center. "Will you go with me, Dad?" she asked, her eyes hopeful. I smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The dance was a simple affair, streamers, punch, a playlist of pop songs, but it was one of the happiest nights of my life. Emily laughed and spun across the floor, her worries forgotten, her joy infectious. I realized then that the real victory wasn't in the courtroom, but in these moments of connection and trust. Still, the shadow of Linda's betrayal lingered. One evening, I received a letter from her lawyer threatening to appeal the custody deceit, and demanding a larger share of our assets. I forwarded the letter to Tom, who replied with a detailed rebuttal and a reminder of the mountain of evidence on our side. "Let her try, Mark. She'll only embarrass herself." I braced myself for another round of legal wrangling, but deep down I knew I was ready. I had survived the worst, and I was stronger for it. As summer turned to fall, Emily and I planned a road trip to visit colleges. We mapped out our route, packed snacks and playlists, and set off with the windows down and the future wide open. Somewhere along a winding mountain road, Emily turned to me and said, "Thank you, Dad, for fighting for me, for never giving up." I squeezed her hand, my heart full. "You're worth every battle, Em." That night, as we camped under the stars, I realized that my journey from humiliation to triumph was nearly complete. The final test would come soon, but I was no longer afraid. I was ready to face whatever came next, with evidence, with dignity, and with the unwavering love of a father who had learned the true meaning of strength. Autumn painted the world in gold and crimson as Emily and I returned from our college road trip, our car full of brochures and inside jokes. The house felt warmer, more alive, and I found myself smiling more often, grateful for the peace that had finally settled over us. But Linda's shadow was never far behind. A week after our return, I received a summons. Linda was appealing the custody decision, claiming I had manipulated Emily and the court. The document was thick with accusations, but thin on evidence. I called Tom, who met me at his office with a stack of files and a reassuring smile. "We've got this, Mark. She's grasping at straws." We spent hours preparing, reviewing every piece of evidence, every report from the Guardian, every note from Emily's teachers and counselors. I updated my journal, adding new entries about Emily's progress, her happiness, her growing independence. The appeal hearing was set for late October. The courtroom was smaller this time, the audience limited to family and a few close friends. Linda arrived with a new lawyer, her face drawn and anxious. Emily sat beside me, her hand in mine, her eyes steady. The judge, a different one this time, listened patiently as Linda's lawyer repeated the same tired arguments: alienation, manipulation, emotional abuse. Tom countered with our mountain of evidence, presenting letters from Emily's teachers, statements from the Guardian, and even a video Emily had made for the court, describing her life with me and her hopes for the future. The judge watched the video twice, his expression softening as Emily spoke of feeling safe, loved, and supported. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke from the heart, describing the journey from humiliation to hope, from betrayal to resilience. I described the father-daughter dance, the college road trip, the simple joys of rebuilding our lives together. Linda's lawyer tried to rattle me, but I stayed calm, letting the evidence speak for itself. The judge asked Emily if she wanted to say anything. She stood, her voice clear and strong. "I love both my parents, but I want to live with my dad. He's always been there for me. He listens. He cares. He makes me feel safe." The judge nodded, his decision swift and final. The appeal is denied. Custody remains with Mr. Carter. Mrs. Carter is encouraged to continue counseling and to focus on rebuilding her relationship with her daughter. Linda broke down in tears, her lawyer patting her arm. Emily hugged me, her relief palpable. Tom grinned, shaking my hand. "You did it, Mark. You won." That night, as Emily and I sat on the porch, watching the leaves fall, I realized that the war was truly over. We had survived every attack, every accusation, every attempt to tear us apart. And we had done it with evidence, with dignity, and with the quiet, relentless power of love. The weeks after the failed appeal felt like a new chapter, one where the air was lighter and the future finally seemed possible. Emily threw herself into her college applications, her confidence growing with every acceptance letter that arrived. I watched her blossom, her laughter returning, her friendships deepening. We celebrated each small victory, her first acceptance, her new part-time job at the local bookstore, her growing independence. I made a point to document every milestone, every moment of joy, adding them to the ever-growing file that had once been my shield in court, but was now a record of our resilience. Linda, meanwhile, faded further into the background. She called less often, her messages shorter and more subdued. The court-ordered counseling seemed to be helping, but the distance between her and Emily remained. Occasionally, she would send a card or a small gift, but Emily always looked to me for reassurance. "Is it okay if I don't call her back right away?" she'd ask, and I would nod, reminding her that her feelings mattered, that she was allowed to set boundaries. Tom and I met for coffee every week, our conversations shifting from legal strategy to life advice. He encouraged me to start dating again, to open myself up to the possibility of happiness beyond survival. I was hesitant at first, but eventually I agreed to let a friend set me up on a blind date. The evening was awkward but hopeful, a reminder that life could still surprise me. One Saturday, Emily and I volunteered at the community center, helping organize a fundraiser for families in crisis. As we worked side by side, I realized how far we had come, from the humiliation of that graduation day to the quiet strength we now shared. That night, as we walked home under a sky full of stars, Emily slipped her arm through mine. "Thank you, Dad." "For fighting for me, for never giving up," I squeezed at her hand, my heart full. "You're my daughter, Em. I'd do it all again." The next morning, I received a letter from Linda. She wrote of her progress in therapy, her regret for the pain she had caused, and her hope that one day we could all sit down together and talk. I read the letter twice, unsure how to respond. Forgiveness was a journey, and I was still walking it. But I was open to the possibility. As autumn gave way to winter, I found myself looking forward to the holidays for the first time in years. Emily and I decorated the house, baked cookies, and invited Tom and David for Thanksgiving dinner. The table was filled with laughter, gratitude, and the quiet joy of a family that had survived the storm. As I looked around at the people I loved, I realized that my greatest revenge was not in the courtroom, but in the life I had rebuilt. One filled with dignity, respect, and the unwavering love of a father who had refused to be broken. Winter settled in with a hush, blanketing the city in snow and giving our home a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. Emily and I developed new traditions: hot chocolate by the fire, movie marathons on snowy nights, and long walks through the park, our breath clouding in the cold air. The holidays were different this year, quieter but warmer, filled with gratitude for the simple fact that we were together and safe. I sent Linda a polite but brief reply to her letter, acknowledging her progress and expressing hope that in time we could rebuild some kind of relationship for Emily's sake. She responded with a note of thanks, her words careful and measured. There was no talk of reconciliation, just a mutual understanding that the past could not be undone, but the future might hold something better. Tom and David joined us for Christmas dinner, the table crowded with laughter and stories. David had started dating again, and Tom was planning a trip to Europe, his first vacation in years. We toasted to new beginnings, to the power of evidence and boundaries, to the quiet strength that had carried us through the darkest days. Emily surprised me with a handmade scrapbook, each page filled with photos, ticket stubs, and notes from the past year. "For the best dad in the world," she wrote on the first page. I hugged her, my eyes stinging with tears. "You're the reason I kept fighting, Em." As the new year approached, I reflected on how much had changed. I was no longer the man who had been humiliated at graduation, no longer the victim of Linda's betrayal. I was a survivor, a mentor, a father who had learned to fight with dignity and intelligence. I started volunteering at the community center more often, leading workshops on legal rights and self-advocacy. People came to me with their stories, their fears, their hopes for justice. I listened, offered advice, and reminded them that they were not alone. Emily flourished, her confidence growing with every challenge she faced. She was accepted to her top-choice college, and we celebrated with a quiet dinner at her favorite restaurant. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad," she said, her eyes shining. "You taught me to believe in myself." I smiled, pride swelling in my chest. "You did the hard work, Em. I just stood by your side." As the clock struck midnight on New Year's Eve, I made a silent promise to myself. To keep living with integrity, to keep fighting for what mattered, and to never let anyone take my dignity again. The war was over, but the lessons would last a lifetime. The new year brought a sense of hope and possibility, but also a few unexpected challenges. Emily was busy preparing for college, her days filled with scholarship essays, campus tours, and late-night study sessions. I supported her every step of the way, driving her to interviews, proofreading her applications, and reminding her to take breaks and enjoy the last months of high school. Our bond grew stronger, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the quiet routines we'd built together. One afternoon, as we sat in the kitchen reviewing her financial aid forms, the phone rang. It was Linda, her voice hesitant but determined. "Mark, I'd like to see Emily. I know I have to go through the Guardian, but I wanted to ask you first." I paused, weighing my response. "Emily's open to it, but only if she feels safe. She's been through a lot, Linda. We both have." Linda sighed, her regret palpable. "I know. I'm working on myself. I just want a chance to make things right." I agreed to discuss it with Emily, and that evening we talked it over. Emily was cautious but curious. "I want to see her, Dad, but only if you're there too." I promised to be by her side. The supervised visit was arranged at the community center with the Guardian present. Linda arrived looking older, her posture less rigid, her eyes softer. She apologized to Emily, her words halting but sincere. "I was wrong. I let my anger and pride hurt you and your father. I'm sorry." Emily listened, her face unreadable, then nodded. "I forgive you, Mum. But I need time." The visit was brief but healing, a small step toward reconciliation. Afterward, Emily and I walked home in silence, the air crisp and full of promise. "Do you think she'll ever really change?" she asked. I shrugged, my voice gentle. "That's up to her. All we can do is live our lives with honesty and kindness." As spring approached, I found myself reflecting on the journey. I had gone from humiliation and helplessness to strength and respect, from being underestimated to becoming a mentor and advocate. I continued my work at the community center, helping others navigate legal traps and rebuild their lives. The foundation Julia and I started grew, attracting new volunteers and donors. We launched a series of workshops on evidence-based self-protection, and the response was overwhelming. People shared their stories, their fears, their triumphs, and I realized that my pain had become a source of hope for others. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily joined me, her head resting on my shoulder. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." I hugged her, my heart full. "You're my greatest victory, Em." The war was over, but the legacy of dignity, resilience, and silent strategic payback would last forever. Spring blossomed in a riot of color, and with it came a sense of renewal that seeped into every corner of my life. Emily was accepted to her top-choice college, and the day the letter arrived, we celebrated with ice cream and a walk along the river. her laughter echoing off the water. I could see the weight of the past year lifting from her shoulders, replaced by excitement and hope. Linda continued her counseling, and while our conversations remained cautious, there was a new honesty between us. She sent Emily a card for her birthday, handwritten and heartfelt, and Emily responded with a thank you note, a small but significant step toward healing. At the community center, the foundation Julia and I had started was thriving. We hosted a legal clinic for seniors, and I watched as people who had once felt powerless found their voices, armed with knowledge and the confidence that comes from being believed. David became a regular volunteer, sharing his own story and offering support to those just beginning their journey out of darkness. One afternoon, Julia and I sat in the sunlit office, reviewing grant applications and planning the next workshop. "You know, Dad," she said, "I never thought our family's pain would become a source of hope for so many people." I smiled, pride swelling in my chest. "That's the best kind of revenge, Julia, turning what was meant to break us into something that builds others up." That evening, Emily and I cooked dinner together, laughing as we burned the garlic bread and improvised a new recipe. Afterward, we sat on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one. "Do you ever wish things had turned out differently?" she asked. I thought for a moment, then shook my head. "I wish it hadn't hurt so much, but I wouldn't trade the lessons we've learned or the strength we've found." "We're better for it, Em," she nodded, her eyes shining. "I'm proud of you, Dad." As the night deepened, I realized that the story of my revenge had become something more, a story of resilience, forgiveness, and the quiet, relentless power of truth. The scars remained, but they were a testament to our survival, not a mark of defeat. And as I drifted off to sleep, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, armed with evidence, dignity, and the unbreakable bond of family. Summer arrived with a gentle heat, and the city seemed to breathe easier, as if the long shadow of the past year had finally lifted. Emily spent her days preparing for college, her room slowly filling with boxes and new bedding, stacks of books, and the nervous excitement of a new beginning. I helped her pack, offering advice on everything from laundry to late-night study snacks, and we laughed about the mistakes I'd made at her age. Linda continued her counseling, and while our relationship remained distant, there was a new civility in our interactions. She called occasionally to check on Emily, and sometimes we spoke about practical matters. Tuition payments, summer schedules, the logistics of moving day. Each conversation was careful, but no longer laced with anger or blame. At the community center, Julia and I launched a summer program for teens, teaching them about legal rights, self-advocacy, and the importance of documentation. The sessions were packed, and I watched with pride as Emily volunteered, sharing her own story with quiet courage. One afternoon, after a particularly moving workshop, Julia pulled me aside. "Dad, I want to expand the foundation. There are so many people who need help. People who don't know where to start, who feel trapped and alone. I want to create a network, a place where anyone can find support, resources, and hope." I agreed, and together we began reaching out to other organizations, building partnerships and securing funding. The work was exhausting but deeply rewarding, and I found myself energized by the sense of purpose it brought. David, too, became more involved, leading workshops on financial literacy and evidence gathering. His calm, steady presence was a comfort to everyone, and I was grateful for his friendship. As the weeks passed, Emily and I spent our evenings on the porch, talking about her hopes and fears for college. He confessed her anxiety about leaving home, about starting over in a new place. But I reassured her that she was stronger than she knew. "You've already survived more than most people ever will, Em. You can handle anything." The night before she left for college, we sat together under the stars, the air thick with emotion. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered, "for fighting for me, for teaching me to stand up for myself, for never giving up." I hugged her tightly, my heart full. "You're my hero, Emily. I'm so proud of you." As I watched her drive away the next morning, I felt a bittersweet mix of sadness and pride. The house was quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet, filled with the echoes of laughter, the memory of battles fought and won, and the promise of new adventures ahead. I knew that the story of my revenge was nearly complete, but the legacy of dignity, resilience, and silent, strategic payback would live on. The house felt cavernous and strange after Emily left for college, every room echoing with memories of her laughter and the quiet routines we'd built together. I kept myself busy with the foundation, pouring my energy into expanding our reach and building new partnerships. Julia and I worked late into the evenings, drafting grant proposals and planning workshops, our shared mission drawing us closer than ever. David became a fixture at the community center, his calm wisdom and gentle humor making him a favorite among the volunteers. One afternoon, as we sat in the sunlit office, reviewing a new batch of applications for assistance, Julia looked up from her laptop, her eyes thoughtful. "Dad, do you ever regret how it all happened? The pain, the courtroom, the public humiliation?" I considered her question, the weight of the past year settling over me. "I regret the pain, Julia. I regret that Emily had to see her family fall apart. But I don't regret fighting for what was right. I don't regret showing her, and everyone else, that dignity and truth matter more than comfort or reputation." She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You taught me that too. I used to be afraid of conflict, afraid of standing up for myself. Now I know that boundaries are a form of love." That evening, I received a letter from Linda. She wrote of her continued progress in therapy, her gratitude for the chance to rebuild her relationship with Emily, and her hope that one day we could all sit down together as a family. I replied with cautious optimism, acknowledging her growth and expressing my willingness to try. The next weekend, we arranged a small lunch at a quiet cafe. Linda arrived looking healthier, her eyes clearer, her voice steadier. The conversation was awkward at first, but as we talked about Emily's college adventures and the foundation's success, the old bitterness faded. We agreed to keep moving forward, one step at a time, for Emily's sake and our own. As autumn deepened, the foundation hosted its first annual gala, a celebration of survival and hope. The ballroom was filled with supporters, survivors, and friends, the air electric with possibility. Julia gave a speech, her voice strong and clear as she spoke of our journey from betrayal to advocacy. "We are proof that even the deepest wounds can heal, that dignity can be reclaimed, and that the quiet power of evidence and boundaries can change lives." The applause was thunderous, and as I looked around the room, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The story of my revenge was almost complete, but the legacy of resilience, forgiveness, and silent strategic payback would endure long after the last guest had gone home. Winter returned, and with it came a sense of closure I had never thought possible. The foundation Julia and I built was thriving, helping more people than I could have imagined when I was locked in that basement, helpless and humiliated. Emily called every week from college, her voice bright with stories of new friends, late-night study sessions, and the small victories of independence. Linda continued her therapy, and while our relationship would never be what it once was, we had found a way to coexist with civility and even a measure of respect. The holidays brought us together for the first time in years. Julia, David, Emily, and even Linda, all gathered around my table, sharing a meal, laughter, and the hard-won peace that comes from surviving the worst and choosing to forgive. After dinner, as the others cleared the table, Emily sat beside me, her hand warm in mine. "Dad, I'm proud of you. You taught me that it's okay to fight for yourself, to set boundaries, to never let anyone take your dignity." I hugged her, my heart full. "You're my greatest victory, Em. Everything I did for you." Later that night, as I stood on the porch watching the snow fall, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. I remembered the terror of the basement, the hunger, the thirst, the humiliation of being denied even the most basic needs. I remembered the courtroom, the evidence, the moment the judge pronounced justice. I remembered the community center, the applause, the hope in the eyes of strangers who heard my story and realized they too could survive. I realized that my revenge had never been about destroying Linda or punishing Julia. It had been about reclaiming my life, my voice, my peace. It had been about showing Emily and myself that even the deepest wounds could heal, that dignity could be rebuilt, and that the quiet, strategic power of truth could change Eve, writhing. As the first stars appeared in the winter sky, I whispered a silent thank you to Tom, to David, to Julia, and to the part of myself that had refused to give up. I was no longer helpless. I was whole. And as I closed the door behind me, I knew that the legacy I left would not be one of pain, but of resilience, hope, and the unbreakable bond of family.